Okay, I'm going to start this one over. I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but I guess we'll call it peering into the dark world that is the modern state of right-wing streamers. Censorship on places like Twitter and YouTube in particular, and of course Twitch, but to be honest, I haven't been on Twitch since before women joined Twitch, let alone when Twitch started hosting like non-video game related content. I mean, it's just so dumb to me. But I don't want to make this about Twitch. It's a terrible website. You should never use it. Getting back to other terrible websites, Twitter and YouTube. The way in which, over the past few years, the Overton window has been shrunk and people on the fringes have been lobbed off, we have to remember from time to time, censorship does not eliminate these people. It doesn't kill them. It doesn't, drive them into the gutter. Some of them it might. Some people, they can't, if they lose their platform, they can't survive. But other people, their audience might be severely reduced. They might be forced onto other websites that maybe you're not as familiar with, like Odyssey, or, as I learned recently, cozy.tv. But nevertheless, these people, they still do exist. Albeit in a, somewhat weakened form. And I have to be honest, I think that this isolation, that this exclusion, this separation from, the general zeitgeist, which I used to like Twitter so much because it was just a blob of everything. You could find every possible idea, no matter how good or how bad on Twitter, and you could find people, saying literally anything. And as we all know, that has changed. Same thing was true with YouTube. YouTube used to be wacky. There used to be a lot of, not-so people on there. There were people who had YouTube channels that were mentally ill and would post just mental illness on their YouTube channel, and it would stay up for years. But as the internet has become more sanitized in the past, really 6 years, I mean, it really kicked into overdrive after Trump's election. We see people who at one point, would have been regarded as, a little kooky, but still a part of human civilization, still a part of, general American political discourse, who have been forced into their own echo chambers, again, not by their own choosing, because, by the will of, the gods of social media. And I have to give, of all people, Destiny, who I've never referenced on this channel, I have to give Destiny credit, because I saw a clip of him. I do not watch streams, I absolutely wouldn't. I don't. As far as left-wing streamers go, or left-wing, pundits go, Destiny is not somebody who I have much interest in. But he made the point that old Nikki J. Fuentes has been really affected by this isolation. And I would tend to agree with him, because I remember Fuentes. I last talked about him at length during the Groyper War stuff, which I thought was fantastic. And I was aware of him before that, too, because, I mean, he was just, I remember him being on Twitter, I mean, I think all the way back to, like, 2016, 2017. He was pretty good at Twitter, I thought. And when I say someone's good at Twitter, that doesn't mean that they tweet things that I, agree with. That means that I think that they're good at using the platform. Milo Yiannopoulos was another one. Milo was the first great Twitter account that I really can remember. Of course, he got banned very early on. He was fantastic, and he was a master at using the platform. He knew how to craft good tweets that were catchy, that you could understand, that were, fit into 120 characters, because that's what it was back then. And I thought Fuentes, while not as good as Milo at that, was a pretty good Twitter account. Of course, he's been gone for quite a while now. He's also been off YouTube for quite a while. I must admit, I never really watched him to begin with, but I would occasionally, if I had nothing else to do, I'd say, oh, well, let's see what old Fuentes is saying tonight, and I would pop on, onto his YouTube stream. And I don't want to make this all about him, but it's just someone that I've particularly noticed this about. Someone who has been kicked off of almost all social media, and it's really, I think, had an effect on them. Because it's not just that you deny someone a platform. You're denying them in a way a reason to access other people on your platform. Does that make sense? So when you kick a crazy person off of Twitter, on Twitter, you've got crazy people, you've got sane people, and you've got, everything in between. And you say, oh my gosh, look, this crazy person is contaminating the normal people. And we can't have that. These normal people are being exposed to craziness. We can't have that. And so the crazy people get kicked off. Well, what happens then is that all the crazy people congregate together and they talk to each other, and and they form a new platform. And on this new platform, let's call it Gab, or you can call it anything. I don't want to say that Gab is particularly crazy. You can call it Mastodon. You call it any one of these Twitter alternatives or YouTube alternatives or anything. Well, if you kick all the crazy people off the supposedly normal-centric platform, well, then on this new platform that they inevitably will gravitate towards, crazy becomes the new normal. And so these people who, by your own admission, who the Twitter gods decry as a crazy person who shouldn't have any influence, is only being influenced by other crazy people. They have no input from normal people. And again, I'm not the one saying that some people are normal, some people are crazy. I'm saying that this is the premise by which people are banned and kicked off of social media. Well, back when somebody like, say, a Nick Fuentes was on Twitter or on YouTube, he would have to deal with comments and replies from people who disagreed with him. The same thing is true in YouTube, in his YouTube chat. He wasn't the biggest YouTube streamer in the world. If a bunch of people came in one night, let's say he got raided by someone who disagreed with him, he would have to face heckling, from people who disagreed with him. And he would have to confront and realize, hey, there's people out there who don't think that I'm right about everything. And that has an effect on people. It strengthens them. It makes them reflect upon themselves. And they have to sharpen their arguments. But when you're off, you take your audience, you pick up your toys, and you go home, and you have a separate platform and all these things where there's nobody except for people who are your friends. You just sort of, you don't grow as much. You just sort of dig in, you find your hole, you sit there, and you rot away. And I think that this is a serious flaw in the censorship game. And I don't mean that like the censors have, good intentions or anything like that. I don't believe that. It's not like the censors think that, by censoring these people, I'm going to create a better and just society. No, it's as simple as the censors hate people who disagree with them, and they want any excuse to get away, to take people who disagree with them off of the internet. But that doesn't mean that their censorship doesn't have a real impact on our politics. What they're doing is... it's sort of like inbreeding. They're separating out all these people, and there is no cross-pollination between people of different viewpoints. Of course, the more that you kick off. Of course, I keep saying, of course, excuse me. At this point, the people who have been censored, let's say it's people like, Fuentes and his fans, and Ethan Ralph and his fans, and other people like that. Basically, anyone who's willing to say the N-word and not worry about getting banned. I'm worried about getting banned, so I don't say the N-word. Therefore, I'm on YouTube. But these other people, they took a stand. They said, you know what? We're going to say it, hard R, whether you like it or not. And so they had to build their own platforms. And I commend them for that. But they and their audience are stuck in an echo chamber. There is no cross-pollination, at least not to the same degree that there was. It's not that it's absolute. It's that there's a lot more resistance to people moving back and forth. And again, it's not that I'm telling, everybody has to change their beliefs. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that people learn from each other. It's healthy to hear from other people who disagree with you. And, most of the things that you're going to hear from people who disagree with you, they're going to sound stupid. And most of the time they're going to be unintelligent arguments. But once in a while, you'll hear something thoughtful from someone who disagrees with you, and it will make your own position stronger, because you'll think about that and you'll go like, you know what, here's why you're wrong. And when we separate people out into these digital ghettos, you get well, frankly, you get the Fuentes-Medicare debate that I talked about last week. Something that I laughed about back then, but I'm realizing is, it was not a one-off event. This is indicative. I mean, this is what's happened to these people. All of these streamers and people who used to be big on Twitter, who were, I guess of the right. I'm not sure, really. Honestly, I don't know what most of them actually believe these days. I don't know if they've changed at all. But I do know that, they are a subculture, but they still have their people and they have their followers. And, they're pretty loud, on the internet. Despite the fact that, Fuentes has been gone off of Twitter, for example. His fans are still pretty prevalent. And Ethan Ralph somehow is still on Twitter. And so these people have some influence. And to the extent that they are ostracized, so too are their viewers and their listeners. And so what eventually happens is, in this echo chamber, people wallow around. They can't fight with, lefties, as much. They can't fight with normies as much. And so they just end up fighting amongst themselves and, just talking about dumb shit that doesn't matter. And that becomes their life. And not just their life. It becomes the life of the people who watch them and who find them entertaining and who, came in because they found their political takes interesting or provocative. And now, we're below Howard Stern, below Bubba the Love Sponge tier content. And so maybe that is going to be the final evolution of this, right-wing streamer subculture that, has migrated since their expulsion from YouTube and Twitter, basically, has migrated to places like Gab, Odyssey, and now Cozy.tv, which I understand, I guess, is Nick's website. And, again, I have to give him credit. He does seem to do and organize a lot of stuff. I mean, he seems to have some actual skill at doing these things. I mean, I couldn't have created a streaming website, or organized all that. I'm sure he didn't code the whole thing himself, but, organized all that, put that together, or put together these big political conventions where you have, a bunch of different speakers and an audience and all that. I wouldn't be able to pull off stuff like that. I have respect for that, but, maybe when you get into an echo chamber like this and everybody generally agrees on, I guess, your political views, you just have to get down into shock jock stuff. And I'm purposefully trying to avoid citing the example of Ethan Ralph. I'm focusing more on somebody like Fuentes because Fuentes was someone who was seemed like a somewhat serious, reasonable person to begin with. Ethan Ralph might be an isolated incident in that I don't know if he was ever like a normal person. And so seeing someone like Fuentes devolve to the level of an Ethan Ralph, that's what started turning the gears in my head. And I'm trying to think of the implications of this, not that these two people in particular are very important. It's that how this will affect other people and everyone else. Because my Twitter account is different from my YouTube. It's very small. I don't say much of anything. I follow other people or whatever. But I thought in my head, I don't know if there's any way to calculate how many mutuals I've lost over the years to bannings. And I'm a very small account. If you expand that, and if we somehow knew everyone who's been kicked out of, what we now consider the public square, and if we went and looked at each one of those people, and somehow could do a counterfactual, what would they be like today had they not been kicked out of the public square? Would they be more reasonable people? And I'm sure this goes for left-wingers too, although I would think left-wingers are going to be victims of this less because, they don't get banned nearly as much for obvious reasons. There are left-wingers who get banned, but typically they're the reasonable left-wingers that get banned from social media. So maybe a better title for this would be, the dangers of the ghettoization of the internet. Anyway, I think I'll end it there. I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.